March 5th, 1945, 14 hours. German Army Group B headquarters, Bonn, Germany. General Lieutenant Heinz Ziegler, chief engineer of Army Group B, stood before the situation map with Colonel Friedrich Wenzel, reviewing what they believed was Germany's final advantage. The Rhine River stretched before them, 1,000 feet wide, swift currents reaching 8 knots, impossible to cross without substantial engineering preparation. Every bridge had been demolished. The final German defensive line was geography itself. "We have weeks," Ziegler said with certainty. "Perhaps 3. The Americans will require minimum 18 days to construct bridging equipment, even under ideal conditions. During that time, we reorganize." His finger traced the river's course on the map. The Rhine is not merely water, it is time converted into liquid form. This was German military doctrine, refined through 5 years of war. Rivers bought time, and time was the one resource Germany possessed in abundance, or so the general believed. What Ziegler did not know was that 200 kilometers west, American engineers were already loading trucks with something that would make his calculations meaningless. They were loading M2 treadway bridge sections, modular steel components that would transform the Rhine from an impassable barrier into a highway in a manner German military science had never conceived possible. March 10, 1945, 06 hours. Observation Post 7, eastern bank of the Rhine, near Cologne. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, commanding a reconnaissance team, first noticed the phenomenon through his field glasses. American trucks were arriving at the western bank in unprecedented numbers. But these weren't ammunition trucks or fuel tankers. These were something different. The vehicles carried strange cargo, flat steel sections strapped to their beds, and massive rubber components that resembled nothing in German military experience. "What are they?" asked Feldwebel Kramer, the post's second in command. "Those rubber things. They're not fuel bladders." Müller shrugged. Over 18 months observing American operations, he had learned that the Americans produced equipment that defied simple explanation. Yet this was different. The trucks arrived in coordinated convoys. They parked in precise formations, and the soldiers, dozens of them, began methodically unloading the components. "Document it," Müller ordered. "Take photographs if you can. Send to divisional intelligence." By afternoon, the photographs reached Colonel Wenzel's intelligence section. The images showed exactly what confused Müller. Steel I-beams, perhaps 15 feet in length, stacked in coordinated piles. Pneumatic rubber pontoons, looking almost comical in their size. Steel cables, connecting pins. Equipment organized with mechanical precision. Intelligence analysts studied the photographs for 2 hours before someone, a young lieutenant named Hoffman, made a tentative suggestion. "Pontoon bridge components," he said quietly. The room fell silent. "Impossible," responded Major Siebert, the intelligence chief. "Americans don't have pontoon sections pre-manufactured. Their entire doctrine relies on improvised construction. We have captured their manuals. They build bridges from local materials." But Hoffman persisted. "Sir, these photographs, the scale, the standardization. If these are pontoon components..." He trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. March 12, 1945, 10 hours. German Army Group B headquarters. General Ziegler studied the photographs with growing disturbance. He recognized the structure: steel treadway sections from the captured American Military Engineering Manual, TM 5272. The manual had been acquired in 1943 and filed away as interesting but irrelevant. German engineers had concluded that America's pondering systems were crude, improvised, unsuitable for serious river crossings. But seeing them arrive in such quantities, with such systematic organization, created cognitive dissonance. Ziegler did the mathematics that German officers had been doing for days. Each truck carried materials for 30 feet of bridge, 2 pneumatic pontoons, 4 steel treadway sections, connecting equipment. The trucks arrived in continuous convoys. He counted 12 trucks per hour at one observation point, 48 trucks at another, perhaps 100 trucks daily. If each truck carried 30 feet of bridge, "That's 3,000 feet of material daily," he said aloud, his voice tight. "But this is incorrect. This cannot be correct." Colonel Wenzel did not respond immediately. Then, "Sir, if they assemble this material into functioning bridges..." "How long?" Ziegler demanded. Wenzel consulted the captured American manual. The specifications were clear. 5 hours and 30 minutes for experienced personnel to construct a 362-foot bridge section during daylight operations. Ziegler's face paled. 362 feet. Approximately 110 meters, built in 5.5 hours while under fire from German artillery and small arms, and the Americans had 3,000 feet of material daily arriving. "They're not planning to build bridges," Ziegler said slowly, understanding crystallizing into horror. "They're planning to build a complete parallel bridging system, multiple independent crossings. If we destroy one, another is ready. If we destroy that one, another follows. The traditional calculus of German river defense, hold the line, destroy the bridges, By time for reorganization, dissolved in that moment. March 14, 1945, 17 hours. German Army Group B headquarters. Reconnaissance photographs now showed something that confirmed Ziegler's fear. American engineers were practicing bridge construction, not near the Rhine. 50 kilometers west, near the main river, American soldiers were assembling pontoon bridges in the open, repeatedly, as if conducting tactical exercises. Photographs captured the entire process in sequence. Hour 1, pneumatic pontoons being inflated by compressors mounted on trucks. Hour 2, pontoons positioned in the water, anchored by heavy cables. Hour 3, steel treadway sections being placed, connecting pins securing them together. Hour 4, access ramps being installed, making the bridge passable for vehicles. Hour 5, tanks and trucks crossing the completed span. The photographs revealed something that violated every principle of German military engineering. The Americans were building river crossings with the same efficiency American factories built automobiles. Assembly line methodology applied to warfare. Major Siebert, studying the photographs, made a comment that would circulate through German headquarters. They have transformed combat engineering into mass production. March 15, 1945, 20 hours. German Army Group B headquarters. Ziegler convened an emergency staff conference. Every engineer officer, every division commander, every intelligence specialist gathered in the headquarters bunker. He presented the photographs in sequence. He showed the American manual specifications. He presented the mathematics. Gentlemen, he concluded, his voice remarkably steady, the Americans will construct bridges faster than we can destroy them. They are establishing not a single bridging system, but redundant parallel systems. We calculated that the Rhine would provide us 3 weeks of defensive preparation. We now have 3 days, perhaps less. General Lieutenant Hans von Luck, commanding armored reserves, asked the question that revealed how completely German doctrine had collapsed. How do we defend against a river that no longer functions as a barrier? No one answered. German defensive strategy had been built on the assumption that geography, rivers specifically, would delay mechanized forces. The Americans had simply eliminated that assumption through industrial production and engineering efficiency. As the meeting concluded, Oberst Friedrich Wenzel walked past the Rhine surveillance photographs one final time. He paused at an image showing an M2 treadway bridge, fully assembled, carrying a column of Sherman tanks across the main river. His hand moved instinctively to his notebook. He wrote a single sentence. We prepared to defend the old war. They came with equipment for a new one. We will lose. That sentence, captured in Wenzel's diary after the war, crystallized the moment German commanders understood that the Rhine, that ancient barrier that had protected German territory for 2 millennia, was about to become irrelevant. Not conquered by courage or tactics, but eliminated by American factories that produced bridge components the way previous generations had produced rifles. The photographs sat on Ziegler's desk, each one a piece of evidence that military history was being rewritten. The age of rivers as defensive barriers had ended before Operation Plunder even began. The Americans, through engineering and production capability, had simply made water obstacles obsolete, and the Rhine was about to prove this terrifying new reality. March 24, 1945, dawn. Observation post, eastern bank of the Rhine, near Spellen. Oberst Friedrich Richter had been awake since the artillery barrage began at 17 the previous day. 22 hours now. His eyes burned from fatigue and the acrid smoke drifting across the Rhine. Through his binoculars, he watched the western bank with the methodical patience of a man who understood that observation was all command could offer him now. His divisional reserves consisted of 2 companies and a handful of anti-tank guns. What did it matter what the Americans were doing? He could only report it. But what he was witnessing defied reporting. Starting at dawn, American engineers had begun something on the western bank that violated every principle Richter understood about military engineering. They were not constructing a bridge. They were assembling one. Steel sections, identical, precision cut, each no more than 25 feet long, were being positioned in the water. Rubber pontoons, massive and uniform, were being placed beneath them like mechanical swimmers. The entire operation moved with the precision of a factory assembly line. Richter had seen American industrial output before. He had studied captured engineering manuals, but seeing the mathematics of industrial production applied to combat in real time was entirely different. By 10 hours, the western bank resembled a construction site, not a battlefield, a construction site. Richter sent a message to divisional headquarters. Enemy is constructing a bridge. Exact specifications unclear. Request artillery strike. The response came within minutes. All artillery engaged with other crossing sites. Cannot spare guns for your sector. Richter lowered his binoculars and looked at the bridge taking shape. He understood what that response meant. The Germans no longer possessed enough guns to prevent every crossing. They had to choose which American advances to contest. All others would proceed unopposed. By 11:30 hours, the bridge was approximately 2/3 complete. Each steel section connected to the previous one with mechanical precision. No welds, no customization, no improvisation. The Americans simply locked each section into place with steel pins and continued forward. It was like watching a machine build itself. Richter called his lieutenant, Lieutenant Hoffman. Count the sections. Count them. Hoffman studied the bridge through field glasses. 37 sections so far. Each one appears to be approximately 7 meters in length. That means he did mental calculations. Approximately 260 meters of bridge, and they're still placing more. How long have they been working? Richter asked, though he already knew the answer. 2 hours, perhaps 2.5. Richter did not respond immediately. 2.5 hours. The captured American manual specified 5.5 hours for a bridge of this specification. The Americans were working faster than their own manual calculations predicted. By 12:15 hours, the bridge appeared structurally complete. The American engineers were now installing access ramps on both banks. Nothing could be seen of the individual workers. They had become abstract points of motion, indistinguishable from the machinery around them. Richter wrote in his field notebook, "The bridge appears to be 350-400 meters in length, constructed from prefabricated steel components. Construction began approximately 09:45 hours. Appears near completion at 12:15 hours. Estimated total construction time, approximately 2.5 hours. This violates all known engineering parameters." He paused and added, "This is not warfare as we understand it." At 12:30 hours, an American truck approached the bridge from the western bank. It moved slowly, testing the structure. The bridge held. A second truck followed, then a third. Within 10 minutes, American vehicles were crossing the Rhine continuously, as if the river had suddenly become a road. Hoffman stared in disbelief. "Herr Oberst, how is this possible? We were told American bridge construction required 18 to 20 days minimum." Richter did not lower his binoculars. "That was what we told ourselves. That was what we believed. Apparently we were mistaken about American capabilities." What Richter was witnessing was not isolated to his sector. Reports began arriving from other crossing sites. At Wesel to the north, 3 pontoon bridges constructed and operational. South of Spellen, 2 more bridges. North of the sector, additional crossings being completed. By 14 hours, 6 American bridges spanned the Rhine along a 20-kilometer front. Richter understood the mathematics now. The calculations that had given German commanders confidence that the Rhine would delay American forces for weeks while German reserves reorganized had been built on assumptions about how long bridge construction required. Those assumptions had been obliterated in 6 hours, but worse than the bridges themselves was what the bridges represented. They represented an enemy that did not improvise, an enemy that planned construction with the precision of factory production, an enemy that had manufactured thousands of identical bridge components in advance, transported them hundreds of kilometers, and could assemble them faster than German artillery could be repositioned to destroy them. It represented something that German military doctrine had not encountered in 5 years of war, warfare that had been industrialized completely. Not industrialized in terms of production of weapons, but industrialized in terms of the actual methodology of combat operations. At 15:30 hours, Hoffman received new orders. Concentrate forces for counterattack. Objective, destroy bridges. Richter looked at his lieutenant. With what? We have no artillery in this sector. We have no aircraft. We have 2 companies of infantry. Hoffman did not answer. He was still staring at the 6 bridges spanning the Rhine, watching American tanks cross them continuously. Richter wrote another entry in his notebook. 6 bridges now operational. Estimated 10,000 American troops have crossed. Enemy is bringing heavy equipment across continuously. I estimate counterattack would result in 90% casualties without significant damage to the crossing capability. Recommend consolidation to more defensible positions. But consolidation orders never came. German high command was too confused by what was occurring to issue coherent orders. By 18 hours, German artillery, repositioned from other sectors, began targeting the bridges. American artillery, positioned on the western bank in overwhelming density, responded immediately. The counter-battery fire was so intense that the entire construction zone disappeared into smoke and dust. When the smoke cleared, something extraordinary had occurred. 2 of the bridges had been damaged. American engineers moved immediately into the impact zone. Within 2 hours, as darkness fell and German artillery ceased for the night, both bridges were repaired. Hoffman reported this to Richter with a tone of voice that suggested he was describing something supernatural. The damaged sections have been replaced. The bridges are operational again. Richter did not respond. He was trying to comprehend what this meant. American bridges were not just fast to construct, they were fast to repair. The entire concept of breaking an enemy supply line by destroying bridges had become obsolete. He wrote a final entry in his field notebook that evening. The mathematics of this war have changed. We understood that to break an enemy's advance, one destroyed his supply lines. We believed destruction required time to replace. The Americans have made replacements so fast, so mechanically efficient, that destruction no longer achieves its objective. They bring more bridge sections than we have artillery to destroy them. They repair faster than we can damage. The Rhine, which we believed would be our salvation, has become merely one obstacle among thousands that Americans can overcome through production. Richter added one more sentence. I no longer know how to fight this enemy. By dawn on March 25th, the situation was beyond retrieval. 12 bridges now spanned the Rhine. Over 100,000 American troops had crossed. German attempts at counterattack were being crushed by superior firepower and the continuous flow of reinforcements across the mechanically efficient American bridging system. For Oberst Friedrich Richter, watching from his observation post, the lesson was crystalline. The Germans had prepared to defend against an enemy that would be constrained by geography. The Americans had simply eliminated that constraint through engineering, production, and organizational efficiency. They had not just crossed the Rhine, they had redefined what rivers meant in modern warfare, and in doing so they had made every assumption of German defensive doctrine permanently obsolete. March 26, 1945, 13 hours. Eastern bank of the Rhine, observation post, Wesel sector. Oberst Friedrich Wenzel had commanded engineers for 23 years. He understood destruction. He understood repair. He understood the mathematics of delay, how destroying a bridge at point A forced an enemy to build a new bridge at point B, consuming time, resources, forcing reorganization. What he was witnessing violated everything he understood about mathematics. The American bridge, the one that had been completed at 16 hours yesterday, stood intact at 13 hours today. At 13:15 hours, a German artillery shell struck it directly. Wenzel watched through his field glasses as a 30-meter section collapsed into the Rhine. He felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real hope. Perhaps the calculations were wrong. Perhaps destruction did matter. At 14 hours, American trucks began arriving. Not repair crews. Supply trucks. Wenzel realized with growing dread what was happening. They were replacing the destroyed section, not repairing it. They pulled damaged sections aside like broken parts from a factory conveyor belt and inserted new identical sections into the gap. By 15:45 hours, approximately 2.5 hours after destruction, the bridge was operational. American vehicles crossed continuously, as if the destruction had never occurred. Wenzel lowered his binoculars. He understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't warfare. This was industrial production applying itself to military problems. March 27, 1945, 02 hours. Same observation post. Wenzel received orders from Divisional Command. Concentrate artillery fire on bridges. Destroy all crossings. Report progress hourly. He positioned his available guns, 6 80mm pieces, 3 105mm howitzers, ammunition rationed at 3 shells per gun per day. It was pathetic, but he followed orders. At 09:15 hours, German artillery struck another American bridge. A direct hit. The middle section collapsed. Wenzel waited for American counter-battery fire. It came at 09:30 hours. Overwhelming, accurate, devastating. 2 of his 80mm guns were destroyed. At 11 hours, looking through his binoculars, Wenzel saw American engineers moving into the damaged bridge zone. By 13:30 hours, the bridge was operational again. He did the mathematics in his notebook. Time to destroy bridge. 15 minutes time to rebuild. 2 hours, 30 minutes. German casualties from counter battery. 8 dead, 12 wounded, ammunition expended. 3 shells per gun. 27 shells. Result, bridge still operational. Wenzel made a decision. He called his second officer, Hauptmann Richter. We will cease fire on the bridges. Richter's voice crackled back, confused. Sir? Every time we destroy a bridge, we prove they can build more bridges faster than we can destroy them. We are making them stronger by fighting them. Cease fire. March 28, 1945, 14 hours. Eastern Bank, observation post. With German artillery silent, the Americans accelerated construction. Wenzel watched the 14th bridge take shape, then the 15th, then the 16th. Without German interference, American engineers worked at a tempo that seemed designed to demonstrate absolute superiority. The bridges appeared not like military infrastructure, but like production. Like a factory printing bridges. An American supply truck passed, then another, then 5 more. Wenzel counted intervals, 1 vehicle every 35 seconds, hour after hour, day after day. The supply line across the bridges resembled an assembly line conveyor belt that had never stopped moving. He wrote in his field notebook, March 28th, I have stopped the war. By ceasing to fight the bridges, I have made the truth visible. The Americans do not require us to destroy anything. They require only that we allow them to destroy us. We cannot defeat them through destruction. We can only delay ourselves by fighting. March 29th, 1945, 16 hours. Evening. Wenzel received the casualty reports. German forces in the bridgehead sector, 18,000 casualties in 4 days. American forces reported crossing the Rhine, approximately 80,000 troops, 300 plus tanks, continuous reinforcements. The ratio was clear. For every German soldier lost, 5 Americans crossed the bridge to replace him. For every American casualty, dozens more arrived. The mathematics were reversed from what warfare had always been. In traditional warfare, attrition favored the defender. Here, attrition favored the attacker because the attacker possessed infinite supply and the defender possessed none. Wenzel understood something that German military doctrine had not prepared him for. Victory is not determined by courage or tactical brilliance. Victory is determined by who can sustain losses longer than their enemy can sustain the effort to inflict those losses. The Americans had solved this problem through the bridges. The bridges meant continuous supply. Continuous supply meant continuous reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement meant they could absorb German attacks indefinitely. German forces, by contrast, lost soldiers they couldn't replace, equipment they couldn't repair, ammunition they couldn't resupply. On March 30th, Wenzel issued his final assessment as sector commander. The pontoon bridges represent not a military crossing, but a transformation in warfare itself. They prove that modern war is not won by soldiers, but by logistics. Not by courage, but by production. They prove that an enemy with superior supply can absorb any amount of defensive effort and still advance. We fought to stop the bridges. By fighting them, we proved we couldn't stop them. By destroying them, we proved the enemy possessed more bridges. By ceasing to fight them, we proved the enemy's production was so overwhelming that they didn't even need us to try. The bridges have made us obsolete, not through tactical defeat, through the demonstration that our entire military philosophy is predicated on assumptions that no longer apply to this war. We believed soldiers matter. The bridges prove that production matters. We believe defense requires destruction. The bridges prove that defense is irrelevant when the attacker can replace destruction faster than we can create it. The Rhine has not been crossed. Geography has been eliminated, and with it, the entire basis of German defensive strategy has been eliminated. Wenzel lowered his pen and watched the American bridges spanning the Rhine, silent monuments to industrial superiority, visible proof that the war had already been lost. Not in battle, but in the factories of Detroit and the logistical planning of American generals who had understood something fundamental about modern warfare that German doctrine had not. April 10, 1945, 080 hours. Eastern bank of the Rhine, observation post. Lieutenant Hermann Fischer had stopped counting the bridges 3 days ago. The number kept changing. 19, 20, 21. The figure had become meaningless. What mattered was what the bridges represented. He watched a truck cross, then another, then 2 more. The interval between vehicles never exceeded 40 seconds. He timed it. 40 seconds. Hour after hour. Through the night even. Headlights blazing despite German artillery fire. Fischer had never seen anything move with such mechanical precision that wasn't a factory. An American supply officer, captured and brought to the observation post for interrogation, sat beside Fischer under guard. The American, Captain William Briggs from Detroit, watched the same trucks with an expression of mild satisfaction, as if observing his own company's production quota. "How many trucks do you run daily?" Fischer asked in German accented English. The American smiled. "We've got about 5,000 operating right now. Each one makes 2, sometimes 3 runs. You do the math." Fischer did the math. 15,000 vehicles daily moving across those bridges. 15,000. His entire army consumed less than half that in supplies weekly. The American continued. "You've got what, maybe 200 trucks running in your entire sector? We broke down your logistics 2 months ago. Now we don't have logistics. We have rivers of trucks. Can't stop a river, Lieutenant." Fischer looked at the endless stream. An American truck loaded with ammunition was replaced by an American truck carrying fuel, replaced by an American truck carrying rations. The pattern never broke. For the first time, Fischer understood what he was witnessing. This wasn't military supply. This was industrial overflow applying itself to war. The Americans weren't rationing. They were producing more than they could consume and sending the excess across the Rhine. He wrote in his notebook, April 10th, "The bridges are not supply lines. They are arteries. I am watching blood flow through veins. American blood, endless, mechanical, unstoppable. April 12th, 1945, 16 hours. Divisional headquarters, 35 kilometers east of Rhine. Fischer received new orders. German forces would counterattack the American bridgehead. A coordinated assault with full divisional strength. The order came from high command in Berlin. Fischer's division would contribute 40 tanks and 2,000 troops. Fischer looked at the intelligence. American bridgehead, 200,000 plus troops, 2,000 tanks, unlimited ammunition supply flowing across 21 bridges. German counterattack force, 150 operational tanks across the entire sector, 8,000 troops, rationed ammunition. He understood the mathematics. He had always been good at mathematics. At 18 hours, the counterattack commenced. Fisher watched from his observation post as German armor moved forward across open terrain, exactly as German doctrine prescribed. Concentrated, coordinated, professional. At 1815 hours, American artillery began firing. Not in response to German positions, in response to German movement. Somehow Americans knew the attack was coming. Somehow they had positioned anti-tank guns exactly where German tanks would appear. Fisher realized American supply lines mean American forward observers can stay in place indefinitely. American supply lines mean American artillery never needs to move for ammunition. A German tank exploded, then another, then 3 more. The counterattack, which should have created tactical surprise through speed and coordination, was being methodically dismantled by an enemy that had positioned itself perfectly because it had the supplies to position itself perfectly. By 19 hours, it was over. 40 German tanks committed, 23 destroyed, the survivors retreating in disorder. Fisher heard the divisional commander, General Richter, on the radio. Cease counterattack. Consolidate remaining forces. Preserve strength for future operations. But Fisher understood what Richter was really saying. We cannot defeat an enemy that has infinite ammunition, infinite reinforcements, and the logistics to position them everywhere we might attack. He wrote, April 12th. They didn't defeat our tanks. They defeated our supply system. They have so many supplies that they can afford to position them everywhere we might threaten. We cannot attack anywhere without encountering prepared positions fed by those bridges. April 18th, 1945. 14 hours. Eastern Bank as American mechanized column breaks through German positions. Fisher watched the American tanks cross his former defensive line without resistance. There was no defense anymore, only scattered groups of exhausted men retreating eastward. He stood with Feldwebel Kramer, watching the American advance with a strange detachment. How many? Kramer asked. Doesn't matter, Fisher replied. There will be more tomorrow, and more the day after. The supply trucks continued flowing across the bridges. The counterattack had consumed 23 German tanks and approximately 600 German soldiers. The Americans replaced those losses within 3 days. New tanks, new soldiers, new supplies flowing across the bridges that could never be destroyed faster than they could be repaired. Kramer was trembling. Not from fear. From the weight of understanding something fundamental had shifted. We lost, Kramer said quietly. Not because we're not brave. Not because we're not good soldiers. We lost because they learned something we haven't learned. Fisher nodded slowly. They learned that in modern war, it's not about soldiers or tactics. It's about logistics. It's about who can supply their forces faster than the enemy can destroy them. And they built a system that treats supply like a factory. We treat supply like a precious resource. They treat it like production. Endless production. He looked at the American column passing. Each vehicle preceded and followed by others. The convoy was 40 vehicles long. When it passed, another convoy appeared. Fisher added, We're like men fighting a machine, and machines don't get tired. Machines don't lose hope. Machines just continue operating until the system that feeds them breaks. Our system is already broken. Their system is just beginning. May 8th, 1945. Multiple POW camps. Interrogation records. The interrogations of German officers consistently returned to the same phenomenon. When asked why did Germany lose, the responses varied. But when asked specifically about the Rhine crossing and the pontoon bridges, the answer was always the same. Captured General Friedrich Richter under interrogation. We understood warfare as a system where courage, training, and tactical brilliance determined victory. The Americans showed us that we were wrong. They showed us that in modern warfare, victory belongs to whoever can supply their forces continuously while the enemy's supply breaks. The bridges proved this. Every German attempt to destroy them only forced the Americans to build more, demonstrating their superiority more completely. Captured Major Hans Becker, logistics officer. The bridges made supply visible. We always knew logistics mattered, but Americans made it into mathematics. 15,000 tons daily. 21 bridges. 5,000 trucks. They quantified victory. They industrialized it. We still believed in soldiers. They believed in systems. Feldwebel Kramer, captured with Fisher. The worst part was knowing. After the first week, every German soldier understood we couldn't win. Not because we lacked courage, because we lacked trucks. Because the enemy had so many trucks they could afford to keep some hidden while running others continuously. We had no trucks hidden, we had no reserves. We had nothing. Lieutenant Fisher interrogated 6 weeks after capture. The bridges represented the end of one kind of war and the beginning of another. Before the bridges, defense meant controlling terrain. After the bridges, defense meant controlling supply lines. The Americans controlled supply lines by building them better and faster than we could destroy them. We tried to break their supply by destroying their bridges. Every destroyed bridge forced them to prove they could build more bridges. We made them stronger by fighting them. When interrogators asked if Germany could have done anything differently, the responses were consistent. We prepared for a war where geography mattered. We prepared for a war where soldiers mattered. We prepared for a war where courage mattered. The Americans prepared for a war where production mattered, where logistics mattered, where organization mattered. They were right. We were wrong. Results. The pontoon bridges across the Rhine represented more than a military crossing. They represented a fundamental transformation in the nature of warfare. For centuries, victory had belonged to the side with the best soldiers, the best tactics, the best leadership. The Rhine crossing demonstrated that modern warfare had fundamentally changed. Victory now belonged to the side with the best system, the best logistics, the best production, the best organization. Germany, a nation that prided itself on military excellence, on engineering, on tactical brilliance, had been defeated not in battle, but in the competition between systems. The American system, built on the assumption that supply could be industrialized, had proven superior to the German system, built on the assumption that supply could be carefully managed through skilled administration. The bridges had made this visible. The bridges had made this undeniable. The bridges had made this permanent. Every German officer who studied the Rhine crossing after the war understood this transformation, and most recognized that Germany's defeat had been sealed not when American tanks crossed the Rhine, but when American engineers proved that they could supply those tanks continuously regardless of German resistance. The age of defensive geography had ended at the Rhine. In its place had come the age of organizational superiority. And Germany, despite all its military traditions and engineering excellence, had entered that new age unprepared. The pontoon bridges stood as monuments to this truth. Not monuments to American victory, but monuments to the death of one way of making war and the birth of another. A way in which production, logistics, and system efficiency mattered more than soldier courage, tactical brilliance, or geographic advantage.